Hi, I'm Jeff Murrah. I want to welcome you to Healthy Marriage Tips, where we've been doing a series on trauma bonds and dealing with them and understanding them. And the other day, someone asked, well, how do you break them? I'm going to give you 5 things. Due to the time constraints I'm under, I'm not going to be able to go into a lot of detail with each of them, but I want to go ahead and at least touch on them. One I've already touched on, which is improve your resilience. That's your ability to bounce back, your mental flexibility, your emotional flexibility. That goes a long way. Number 2, I call this the stabilize and intervene approach. With this one, you'll do things like establish some safe boundaries before you take steps to go ahead and break the bonds. If you don't do that, then what happens, you're trying to break a bond with someone and it's not safe, so there's a possibility you could temporarily interrupt the bond and end up bonding even closer. That's where you want to stabilize and intervene. And these are not just word games. Literally, what you're trying to do in your brain is increase the use of the hippocampus, in terms of solving problems and coming up with things, and lowering the stimulation of the amygdala, which is that part of the brain that's your alarm system that lets you know things are alarming. You literally have to make the situation safe before you go ahead and intervene. Now, some other things you're going to need to do, because I wish that trauma bonds were something that like a fragile glass that you could hit and break and be done with it, but that's not the case. A lot of times, because they've gotten established and essentially they've gotten in your head and in your heart, it's going to take some vigilance to get out of them. So number 3 is challenge the negative self-talk. Because part of the trauma bond, you're always beating yourself up, and you're going to need to challenge. So when there's comments like nobody loves me, nobody thinks I'm pretty, stuff like that, challenge that. If there's 1 or 2 people out there that think you're pretty, you can't say nobody thinks you're pretty. Because a lot of times you'll make those generalized negative statements about yourself. Be willing to challenge them rather than accept them as gospel truth. That's going to be part of undoing some of the programming that's going on. Number 4, you're going to need to mentally separate the past from the present. You say, well, I'm overweight. I mean, you may have been overweight back when you were in the 10th or 11th grade, and people said mean things to you now. But at this point in your life, you're 30-year-old, you're no longer a teenager, and you're going to have to realize that was quite a few years ago. Separate past from the present. You may have to stick years on some of the sayings that go on in your head to remind yourself when they were said and how that applied then, but not now. Because one of the things with trauma bonds, stuff from the past bleeds over to the present, to where you feel like you're reliving a lot of those past traumas. You're going to have to start putting distance between what happened then and where you're at now. Because as long as things blur, you're going to be feeling the effects of it. Now, number 5, internalize helpful people. So if there's people out there trying to help you, get them in your brain, get them in your heart and your head, rather than the damaging people. Years ago they had the bracelets, WWJD, what would Jesus do? I like that idea, because it gets you to think in terms of how would such and such person handle the situation. And when you think in those terms, think of the people. It might be an uncle, an aunt, a parent, someone who was very helpful in your life. How would they handle it? It could even be somebody who you admire or look up to, and think about how would they handle it. Because as you have that in your head and you rehearse that, it's going to give you more options more ability to make choices rather than by default going to what you knew already, which is the trauma bond. But this will give you 5 things that you can do. With each of them, they will take practice. They're not something that you do once and that's it, because it's literally you're going to have to decrease the power of the trauma bond bit by bit. It'd be nice if it went from, full intensity to none overnight. It doesn't happen that way. It didn't develop that strength overnight. It's not going to go away overnight. So this will give you a place to start. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, concerns, feel free to leave them below. I'll be glad to get back to you. Thank you for tuning in. And until next time, this is Jeff Murrah wishing you best regards. Goodbye.